Hey, it's Thomas. In this episode, I chat with my friend Doug Gorney about the joy of making art. What I appreciate about Doug is his passion and warmth on the subject. I think you'll really enjoy hearing about Doug's creative journey. Hello, and welcome to the Creative Shoofly Podcast. I'm Thomas Beutel. This podcast is about my creative process. And one thing I found is that I really get in my way a lot when it comes to making art and being creative. I want to do this podcast because I know it'll force me to think more deeply about creativity. I'm hoping that doing this will push me and challenge me to create better art. Well, welcome back everyone to the Creative Shoofly. Today I have a guest and a friend of mine, Doug Gorney. He is a brilliant artist. He's the founder and organizer of Sunset Sketchers, our local urban sketching group here in the neighborhood, and also a member of the Boardside Collective. Doug, welcome. I've been looking forward to have you on today.
Thanks, Thomas. Well, I'm very excited to be here and to talk about creativity with you.
Yeah. Doug, can you start by telling us just a little bit about your background in the creative world? How did you get started?
Well, my career path is rather circuitous, but I was always interested in the creative arts. I spent most of my time in high school in the art room or the art teacher's office, hanging out and doing art and taking as many art classes as I could. I sort of majored in art in high school, if there
Nice.
were such a thing. And then going on to college, I came back to art in my senior year, sort of minored in art, and then got a lot of encouragement from a sculpture teacher
Uh-huh.
who told me that this was really something that I should consider doing for a living, that I had some facility with it. And I was majoring in history, which is a springboard into many fields like unemployment. So I was open to suggestion, and
Yeah.
this seemed like a sign. So I went on to art school from there once I graduated from UC Berkeley, and really was going after another bachelor's degree because I didn't have the equivalent of a BFA that would have allowed me to get a master's degree. And I didn't also, having been away from art and then just come back to it, I didn't really know what I was doing. So
Mm-hmm.
a BFA program seemed appropriate. I started at then California College of Arts and Crafts, now California College of the Arts,
Mm-hmm.
and then transferred to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
where I was for a year and a half. And that was very interesting and seemed to be pretty promising. I was developing more of a sculptural style, a sculptural language of my own.
Mm-hmm.
But life took a series of left turns, as it will. And I didn't come back to art for another 30 years after that point. I didn't really even pick up a pencil during that whole time. What I was doing for a lot of the time was, well, I've been practicing transcendental meditation
Mm-hmm.
since I was 13 years old. And this was a practice that was very fulfilling for me on a very holistic level.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and I became a teacher of the TM program and was full time in the TM organization and teaching TM for a number of years. And then another sort of compass shift occurred, and I while still enjoying the practice and enjoying teaching, I started to feel that I should be doing something more creative, something more personal. And
Mm-hmm.
so I came back to the Bay Area after traveling and living all over the continent and in the UK for a while. So I came back to the Bay Area with a vague notion that I should be doing some creative stuff. And I was trying a bunch of things in music. I was with the Stars Agency here in San Francisco doing
Mm-hmm.
commercial acting and modeling and voiceover.
Mm-hmm.
I was working with my brother making a comedy CD and also with some little success doing design. But what really stuck at that point was writing. So I basically became a writer, primarily commercial copywriting, but with as much creative writing as I could. But nothing that really seemed like that it was my life's direction. Now, at a certain point around 2011, my father had a stroke and he lived up in Napa. He and my stepmother lived alone and she was going to need some help taking care of him as he recovered. And so I moved up there to Napa and lived there for a year and a half. During that time, he was a very accomplished surgeon and really an
Your father
important,
was?
he was, yeah,
Yeah.
and an important figure in his profession. And but here he was quite reduced. One thing, though, that he still could do and always had a facility for was art. He had a studio that he had put together in his home. And so he was doing art during the day. And to have something to do with him, I got a sketchbook
Mm-hmm.
and some pencils for the first time in almost 30 years, started sketching with him. And he enjoyed that. And I did too.
Was he sketching or was he painting or what kind of art was
Yeah,
he doing?
he was doing a little painting. His preferred medium actually was colored pencils.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was quite good with the colored pencils.
Right.
Sometimes I thought he liked collecting the colored pencils more than actually using them. And actually, he's since passed on, and I have inherited about 8,000 colored pencils, and I don't really use
Wow.
them, but they're gorgeous. Anyway, so I found in sketching myself, sketching him in large part, and I'm so glad that I have those sketches,
Mm-hmm.
that I hadn't, even in my time away from creating art, and mind you, I really hadn't done anything in art at all. I really don't think I did a single even doodle during this whole time. That I hadn't lost it. It was still there
Right.
somehow. And if anything, it had gotten a little more mature. Somehow it was as if in the back of my mind, somewhere in consciousness, I had been working on that neurophysical connection that
Mm-hmm.
creates visual art.
Mm-hmm.
And so I moved back to San Francisco. And then it was really when I moved to the Sunset that, and I should say that I kept sketching a bit. I kept my sketchbook up, having reestablished the practice. But it was when I moved to the Sunset in 2015-ish,
Okay.
I was so inspired by the light and space and forms of the Sunset, which, even though I had grown up in San Francisco, was a new place to me.
Right.
Really, the marine light and the Dolger homes, it all seemed very strange and foreign. I'd never ever been out here, and so it really seemed to inspire me. It called me to sketch it, to render it.
I think you had written somewhere that you grew up in North Beach.
That's correct. Yeah, Telegraph Hill, really. I sometimes say North Beach just
Mm-hmm.
because it's more general and people might know it more, and
Right.
it seems maybe a little less elite. But it was really Telegraph Hill that
Okay.
I grew up on. I was born technically, I was born in the Mission District of San Francisco, but that was just the hospital. But I for all intents and purposes,
Right.
I was born on Telegraph Hill. Grew up there until college, really.
A native San Franciscan.
And one of like 3 or 4 in total. But so anyway, I started really drawing the sunset. It became my muse. Seemed to call out to me to tell its story, because San Francisco, of course, is a much storied place, and Lord knows we have many images of it in art and music and movies and television and so forth. But the part of San Francisco in which we live, the western part, the Sunset District, is often ignored, and not even San Franciscans, such as myself, know much about it. And so it seemed to want another person to help to help tell its story, to paint
Yeah.
its picture, so to speak. And so that's become a thing for me. People started asking me to paint their houses. I should say watercolor, by the
Mm-hmm.
way, is my primary medium. Sometimes pen and ink, fountain pen, but always watercolor. So people started giving me commissions to paint pictures of their houses here in the Sunset. And I've been doing that pretty much full time for the last 3 years. And it's been
That
very fulfilling.
that's fantastic. Can you tell me a little bit about how the Sunset Sketchers started?
Sure. I started, of course, I don't think any of this, well, any of it as far as my career goes, would have been possible without the internet, which was, I'm of the pre-internet generation. I'm that old. And so when I started to sketch the sunset, I put my stuff online on Facebook and Instagram and Nextdoor and whatnot. And this not only got me a nice reception from homeowners, as I mentioned before, but from other artists, which was very important to me, who said this is very nice work. And also, would it be nice to sketch the sunset together? There are quite a few creative artists out here in these Western neighborhoods, but it's more quiet out here. It's more spread out. There are fewer gathering places, gathering points. I think there is a tendency to feel cut off, or at least not have a community, a creative
Mm-hmm.
community out here. And that's something I should say that we're doing more, not only with the Sunset Sketchers, but with the Boardside Collective, which you mentioned and which you and
Right.
I are both part of. And so artists got in touch when I'd post something and say, wouldn't it be fun to have a sketching group? So I coined the name Sunset Sketchers. It's not a real reach creatively to come up with that one. And then Tammy Sark, who's another very talented sunset artist, helped me and created a Facebook page to act as a gathering point and an announcement place for meetups. And we started meeting a few artists and I, both full-time professional artists and also very talented part-time. I don't want to use the word hobbyist because it's such a value judgment to it,
Mm-hmm.
but artists who were professionals at other things but had an art background. And we have been meeting for about 3 years now, and it's been growing quite a bit. And we've met now all over the Sunset District, our 5 mile square area of Western San Francisco by the beach, as well as other adjacent parts of Western San Francisco.
Right.
And it's been a lot of fun.
I've been utterly delighted to meet so many of the artists because you don't know until they sort of come out and you meet them, and it's like, yeah, there are a lot of artists in the Sunset.
There really are.
Yeah.
And another podcast from the west side of San Francisco, Outside Lands,
Yes.
which I've gotten a lot from, has had some episodes where they've talked more about the creative professionals and innovators who have come from, lived in, or grew up on, or grown up on the west side.
Right.
And there really seems to be a tradition here in the Outside Lands of thinking outside the box. I mean, we are at a remove from the rest of San Francisco, and also, if you look at it from space, we're removed a bit from the rest of the continent. We're really on the edge here.
Mm-hmm.
It's next stop Japan, and there is a feeling of being in some kind of liminal space that I think is a good place for artists to create, for us to be able to think creatively, to get in touch with our creative selves without being distracted by the hurly-burly activity of the central city.
For my listeners who are not particularly familiar with San Francisco, we are on a peninsula. We're surrounded on three sides, the west, north, and east side, with water. But the center of the city is a set of hills that are almost 1,000 feet high, so almost 300 meters high. And so the city is really divided, even though it's just a small, 7 mile by 7 mile square place. The city is divided in that way, and one of the unique aspects of being near the ocean is that we on the west side get a lot of fog because the water's cold here, and the east side of the city, which is only a few miles to the east, they have a lot more sunshine than we do out here.
It should be noted that the temperature, the ambient temperature, can vary between one point in the city and another by as much as 30 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
And we are usually the low point and
right.
of that variance here in the
Exactly.
Sunset District.
So, Doug, the Creative Shoofly is about breaking through blocks and finding joy in the act of creating. So, I'm wondering what aspect of making your art brings you the most joy?
The notion of doing this full time, of being finally a full-time artist, which I guess I was supposed to have done or was in the process of doing 35 or so years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The notion of actually doing that is so radical that someone could indulge themselves in creativity and have as their means of income being a creative artist seems so radical and revolutionary, and almost I can do this, I can get away with this, that in and of itself, just doing it is joyful. It's
Yeah.
almost a giddy sense of joy that, hey, look, I'm creating art full time. People are paying me to do that. I'm paying my rent that way, and I am an artist. So that is almost a radical declaration of creative independence that has a fierce joy in and of its own. And of course, there are many aspects to creating the art, and some are more joyful than others. One thing that I am dealing with these days is that my bread and butter, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
which is I do primarily portraits of people's houses, watercolor and sometimes watercolor and pen and ink portraits of the distinctive architecture that we have out here in the Sunset District for homeowners, which has been such a gift to be able to do and has taught me so very much about the medium and about art in general,
Mm-hmm.
and pursuing that as a vocation, and particularly in creating as realistic or representational an image as I can of someone's home, someone who has entrusted me to render an image of their much loved home. So that has been a great discipline, and it provides me with profound satisfaction when I can do that. But there is also an artist inside me that is interested perhaps in exploring other spaces, an artist that was doing that sort of exploratory training and research, if you will, in art school. But then there was this kind of arrested development as I was doing other very important things to develop me as a human. I had really left art. And now that I've returned to it, there are things that I want to find out, things that I don't even know what they are yet, but I want to see what lies out there, what I might do, what I might find inside me. So I have been taking more time of late each day, trying to carve out some time from my mornings, similar to the process you have mentioned in your podcast that you have been going through, to do stuff that's just for me.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly going out, just getting myself out of my studio / bedroom, which has been really important just for, breathing fresh air, and getting out and sketching the world from life, and doing it in a way that is not for any audience, not even thinking of sharing it with anyone, and just trying stuff.
Getting into the sandbox and playing.
Exactly. Getting
Yeah.
into the sandbox and playing, just trying stuff, getting messy,
Yeah.
pushing myself to the point of making mistakes and through making mistakes. So that has been a tremendously joyful addition to my art practice. And that's what's currently providing me the most joy. In that process too, it's a little bit like a visual morning pages. The Artist's Way talks about the importance of doing your 4 morning pages of writing right when you wake up. Just don't edit, don't direct it, just let it go. Just write whatever's on your mind, whatever comes out. So it's kind of that, but in a visual sense. And that has opened the door to some very other interesting lines that seem to be coming out of more abstract work, even some collage now. And I'm really excited by it, and I can see it going somewhere as more finished and possibly, who knows, marketable line of art.
When you start your morning and you're going out into the sandbox, that metaphorical sandbox, do you have any mantras or any rituals or anything that you tell yourself when you go out there?
I'm not sure. The act of, I would just say that the act of doing it, of actually doing it, not just thinking about, well, I really should do something like that. Really should take some time for myself. But the act of actually getting up, putting on my little day pack with all of my paper and watercolors and my drawing kit in it, and getting out of putting on shoes, getting out of the house, that is quite, again, a radical act, and also a little bit of a ritual. The more I do it and the more I do it at the same time, the more that in of itself becomes a very, very important ritual. And beyond that, I think that's the main thing. And I'm really so amazed still, or maybe amazed is putting it a bit strongly, but so surprised to find myself out of the house in the morning, just by myself, sketching what I want, doing what I want, that I'm still so suffused with the surprise and the excitement of the possibility inherent in that act. I suppose that's the main thing at this point. That's kind of the only thing I can even think about is, wow, I'm out here.
It's gratifying.
Yeah. I should say too that the Sunset Sketchers has provided that too. We do it every weekend, but that's of course just one day during the week. And also, being the organizer, which is not an onerous task at all. It's really it's very gratifying to create a space and a place for artists to come out and sketch together from life. Many of these artists being my friends now.
Right.
But there's some organizational tasks involved in all of this. So you can't just completely lose yourself in it for as long as you want, as I can with this personal artist journey that I take each morning.
That makes me think of another aspect of being in a place where we have so many artists that live around us and have so many different talents, and that is one of collaboration. We also have the Boardside Collective, which is a highly collaborative venture.
Yes.
And, I know for myself that almost all of the art that I practice is done solo, is done on my own. But there is something that is just so exhilarating when you collaborate on a project. And I'm wondering what your thoughts on that is.
I absolutely agree. It's a very different kind of thing. It's the joy of teamwork and cooperation. First, and even more primarily, the aspect of human fellowship, which is something that you can really miss. Well, that so many of us have missed around the world during this pandemic.
Right.
But also which one can really miss as a creative artist in this society, and particularly where we're doing so much of our stuff online. And I have to say, with regard to the pandemic, that my life didn't actually change very much at all during the pandemic, because I get up and I go to work on the commission I'm working on at my desk, and then I may give myself a treat and go out for lunch and see someone on the sidewalk when I'm doing that. I'm not a lonely person, but it can be a little bit isolating, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
professionally. So the board side and the Sunset Sketchers too have been great opportunities to have fellowship with fellow creatives.
One of the things that I noticed during the pandemic is how well and how strongly we pulled together. As the Sunset Sketchers, as an example, we figured out how to sketch together on Zoom, and the board side as well. Is, we were staying in touch and we were collaborating on things, even though we weren't necessarily meeting. And so I feel that in some ways our collaborations became even a little bit stronger, just because because we needed to.
I agree. I think that, as you say, figuring out those other channels of collaboration really strengthened the way that we work together and the work that we've done. And it has also shown, particularly in the case of the Sunset Sketchers, how strong of a desire there is for people to create together.
Right.
And I should just say that there's always a feeling that San Francisco, the rest of the world kind of ignores you, won't come to you, so you have to do something yourself. But we, in that self-sufficiency, we were the only group who was, when there wasn't a lockdown, who was actually meeting. We found a way to meet together, wearing masks and being appropriately distanced and so forth. And we still are, as of this recording, we're still the only sketching group in Northern California that I know of that is doing in-person sketching meetups. So that's been wonderful. But I wanted to come back to one thing that we had been talking about before, about the Boardside Collective. And one of the ways in which it has been wonderful is in this area of collaboration that we were talking about a little bit earlier. It is a truly collaborative effort. The Boardside is two things primarily. First of all, it's a physical space. It's in the back of a residence near the beach. And the owner of the house, our friend Thorsten Sideboard, has really wanted to turn it into a space for the arts, for visual art exhibits, and also for concerts, readings, and other creative events. And we have worked together very well to make that happen. We've had a few shows now. We're actually having another show the 19th and 20th, The Art of Entropy, the artist Bianca Nansik, who goes by the name Entropy, a wonderful multimedia installation. And in curating and mounting these exhibits, it's really an all hands situation where everybody plays a role and contributes and thinks together about the best way to put these things on. And then on the day of, and it's always wonderful and festive, and we have bands, music, and the neighbors are cranking up their bubble machines, but everybody is collaborating to really make a creative event happen. The other primary function of Boardside Collective is the zine that we put out, which is called, oddly enough, Boardside. And that is something that all of us contribute to, all of us collectively edit. Thorsten, I should say, does the lion's share of the design and layout and so forth, but we've all written things and created art to go into the zine, created the covers for it. So it's a very cooperative and very fulfilling effort, and something that it's by its nature probably wouldn't happen if we were doing it individually. Its very existence, to say nothing of its nature, is due to the fact that we are a collective and that we're working collaboratively.
One thing that's so exciting to me is just the great variety of art styles and types and talents. I mean, we have visual artists, we have sculptors, we have people who use code.
That's true.
Create music, do writing. I mean, it really covers almost everything you can think of.
It really does. That's very true.
In terms of what you can do creatively. It's pretty amazing.
I just, and this is just maybe a a sidebar to the story, but in thinking about how we work as a collective beyond fulfilling the specific tasks that we've set out for ourselves or the purview of our organization, it's also something that I think has paid off as far as acting as a resource for us to use in our individual
Mm-hmm.
mediums. I'm thinking, just as one example, of a project I was working on, a commission that I had for someone. They had a house with a beautiful view of the Western avenues and the ocean beyond,
Mm-hmm.
with a beautiful 180-degree sweep from Bohemian Grove to the south to Marin County to the north and the Marin headlands. And they wanted me to capture the whole thing, that view, but in a way that would let them remember, because they were about to move, let them remember their
Oh,
beautiful
yeah,
living room.
right.
So I was wrestling with how to do this, because if you sort of stood in the middle of the living room, of course you would see the windows, but you couldn't really get the view in any way that would register. So this was just kind of bouncing around in my head. One of the wonderful things about the board side is that, upcoming show or not, we always have a weekly meeting to discuss. There's
Mm-hmm.
always something to discuss. It's just nice to have that as a creative get together that you can have during the week. And I brought this up. I just sort of floated this idea. And Thorsten Sideboard, who I'd mentioned earlier, is a very talented comics artist, comic book artist.
And
And
graphic
so,
novels, right?
yeah, exactly. And so he thought about my visual problem from his perspective. And he came back with a great solution, which was very much comics centered. And he said, well, just do it panel by panel, just like we do in the comics. And each panel will be one window. And you could
Right.
look at the window and sort of center the window frame within the frame of that comics panel, if you will. And if there are 4 windows, then you do 4 panels, and each one is a slice of the view. And that made a lot of sense. And that's exactly what I did. It worked out pretty well, and the client was delighted. But I just liked so much that it was that kind of collaborative, creative thinking that really drew upon the strength of a collective. I've
Yeah.
always wanted, I must say, since my younger days of being so fascinated by the Dada artists and Fluxus and various of the other European, slightly anarchic, very sort of beyond modernist movements that were going on that really created the visual art of the 20th century. I wanted to be part of a collective. That just seemed like the greatest thing. And now I am, and it's very fulfilling.
It's very emergent, right? There's just so
Yes.
much that can come out of
Yes.
being in a collective.
Yes.
I want to end with this question. I'm wondering what you are most looking forward to, or what's exciting you in terms of art.
Well, it's interesting you should ask that, because coming back to a little earlier in my conversation, I had mentioned this new style or this new line of work that seems to be coming out of its own accord, more expressionist, more abstract, more out of the box. And that really has me very excited, because it is more personal, because I don't know where it's going, and that sense of the unexpected and the sense of taking a journey. You never know exactly what you'll find on your journey. That's kind of why you're taking your journey. And also, this art is driven very much, and in a way that's more unlike the more detailed, precise, representative work that I do. It's driven by the very inchoate, very expressive and emotional, I might say,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes messy creativity that's inside. So certain of the work that I'm doing now starts with me just putting my pen on the page, and then an automatic process takes over, in which the pen just really, it's going to sound very woo-woo, but the pen just moves really of its own accord.
Right. The art is using you as an instrument
Well, yeah.
to create itself.
Now that is an interesting thing right there that you said, and I feel that idea writ large is really almost what's governed my whole career as an artist, if you will. But it's a very pure distillation now where I'm coming up with things that are drawing themselves. Sometimes I'm just looking at my arm moving. I say, okay, are we done yet? No, we're not done. We have to keep going. Okay, okay, now, no, all right. And then that part of it finishes, and I may use a bit more of my intellect / superego, individualized personality, my conscious self, to make some decisions about what should be done to take it to a next level, make it more presentable by adding watercolor within some of the fields of squiggly lines. But that all is very exciting, and it feels very integrating. It feels like a journey on which I'm just beginning, and I don't know where it will go and where it will take my art, but it has me. And I keep returning to this because I've been talking to people about it, how excited I am, and it's kind of scary. And what does this mean for my career, etc.
Yeah.
But it's very exciting, and it's exciting. I think now that I'm talking to you, I think it's exciting mostly because it gets to the core of the creative process. It's just sort of pure, unfiltered, unmitigated, unadulterated creativity happening. And that's a really interesting process. So who knows where it will go, but it sure is exciting.
Well, Doug, this has been a wonderful conversation. I just want to acknowledge how, I'm feeling excited just by you telling me that, by telling me how you're feeling about it and what comes up for you. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Thomas. And I've not only enjoyed working with you as a part of the Boardside Collective and as a fellow sunset sketcher, but also so enjoyed seeing your creativity express itself in the completely sui generis work that you are doing with your particularly, well, with everything you do, your wide and varied creativity. And particularly enjoy the way that you're able to wed your background as a technologically adept person and a maker with your creative vision and come up with some really singular creations. So and also now I'm really spreading it on thick, but I've really really been enjoying your podcast, particularly what you are saying about creativity, and so much of it resonates with the processes that I've been going through. And as well, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. I mean, working by myself all day, I can listen to a lot of podcasts as I scribble away. And yours is exceptionally well produced and thoughtful, and it's always a pleasure to listen to.
Well, thank you, Doug. I really appreciate that. I am so excited for the near future, with Boardside and with things opening up again. I'm really excited for what's going to happen.
Well, thank you, Thomas. And thank you for the opportunity to talk. It's been a lot of fun.
After my conversation with Doug, I realized that I'd forgotten to ask how people can view his art or ask for a commission. You can visit his website at gorney.studio. That's GORNEY.studio. His email is douglas@gorney.studio. You can also see his art on his Instagram at Outer Avenues Art. Doug mentioned both the Sunset Sketchers and Boardside. You can find the Sunset Sketchers on Facebook. Just search for Sunset Sketchers in the search bar. The Boardside has a website. It's theboardside.com, except that it's spelled this way: THEB, 0, ARDSIDE.com, theboardside.com. And as always, I will have all the links mentioned in this podcast at the top of the show notes. Once again, I'd like to thank you for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate that you take the time to listen. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Doug, and I hope there was something in our conversation that will help spark your creativity. And I would love to get any feedback that you have. You can email me at thomas@creativeshoofly.com. I hope you'll join me for the next episode of Creative Shoofly. Until then, stay safe and stay creative.